The amazing digital circus is a place where all of the characters can feel rather innocent due to the childlike atmosphere of the in-world game. However, with each passing episode, we get deeper into each character's past, and it's becoming clear that while they are all great characters, none of them are necessarily good people, as it wasn't just Gangle's mask that slipped in the recent episode, so to speak, but really, we got insight into a lot of how all of them actually operate on a deeper level. My name is Deep in the Box, welcome back to Cartoon Universe, and let's discuss the monster beneath each of these characters. Early on in the Digital Circus's release, Gooseworks put out a post saying that out of all of the different characters, Jax deserves to be there the most, which is very particular wording. First, Gooseworks said he deserved to be there the most, indicating that they all deserve to be there on some level. From a storytelling perspective, Gooseworks is working on the idea that these characters aren't just innocent souls trapped in a video game, and instead, the Digital Circus is becoming a place where people fall victim to their own personal issues, at least those who are unwilling to work through them. It's no secret that the show has a lot of parallels to Christianity and Gnosticism, with the Digital Circus being presented as a sort of hell that the characters are trapped in. As far as these characters can see ahead, it's basically just a prison where they are under the control of an entity who thinks himself as something of a god, but who only ever seems to make them suffer like a devil. With that in mind, the show is dealing thematically with what these characters deserve, not in a literal sense, as they are human, and as humans we tend to understand their issues. But instead, the real monster inside of them is the one that creates their own personal prison in the Digital Circus. Part 1. Gangle. The most obvious of characters setting themselves up for failure is Gangle, who in the most recent episode created her own personal hell. This was interesting as on some level it was somewhat therapeutic for her, but it was also a trying ordeal that seemed to leave her feeling worse than when she started. The Digital Circus is essentially a fantasy land, and because of that, the characters do have the opportunity to make it something of a heaven. It's hard to do that when you feel limited and trapped, but they could take what the universe has given them and try to make the best of it. Gangle's idea to actually work a normal job for a day was actually pretty smart, because it shows the characters can get Kane to give them a situation they actually want, even if just at a moment's notice. Kane does also want to show off his personal creations, and they do have to put up with that, but the situation that Gangle gets into at Spudsy's was entirely her own creation. The problem is she didn't use it to create something that would be refreshing for everyone, but instead created something that was refreshing only for her because of the fuel she is able to milk from the others. What Gangle wanted was to be in charge, and the only place she really knew to be in charge was a place like Spudsy's, where there's very simple jobs and her place in it is just to match everyone else up with what they need to be doing. She gets a rush out of being the boss, not by actually leading people, but by just telling them to keep going when they're clearly tired. Her job is to make other people suffer more with a smile on her face, and it unfortunately gives her a feeling of success. Jax is a character we'll talk more about later, but with this example, we can see that Gangle desires a similar type of fuel that Jax gets from the others as well. He's a typical bully, and by being a bully, he gets to be the boss of everyone, because everyone is living in fear of him and reacting to his antics, and all of this gives him energy. Gangle gets the same kind of energy, just from a different kind of situation. The episode made it seem like this kind of control is something she only needs here and there, perhaps even just in response to other people trying to have authority over her, such as a bully like Jax. But with Gangle being a shift manager in her real-life job outside of the Digital Circus, that means she was doing these same behaviors pretty much every day. Gangle's life was miserable, but what she got was fuel for making other people more miserable than her, and using the fact that she can hide her own misery as a way to get herself ahead of them in the workplace. At the end of the day, that doesn't mean Gangle deserves to be in the Digital Circus, but rather, when placed into a limited space like the Digital Circus, her existing traits, both positive and negative, dictate what she puts herself through, just like with everyone else. And because of some of her more toxic traits, she chose to put herself and the others through a shift at Spudsy's. She's the perfect reminder that real-life people don't tend to be all good or evil, but rather we're a mixture of both, with us trying our best to put the positive traits up front, to make us look like a smiling, happy children's toy in order to hide the monster beneath the surface that also exists. It doesn't make the positive parts of us fake, and the same is true for Gangle, and the show seems to be exploring this with every character, giving us characters who are nuanced people instead of just NPCs set on default of naturally good or evil. Part 2. Ragatha. Within the same episode that we explored Gangle's monster within, we also got a glimpse of the monster inside of Ragatha. Kane had referred to this adventure as an honest, hard day's work at Spudsy's, and because of that, the characters were sometimes manipulated to more so feel like stereotypes of restaurant workers. Ragatha is usually the character that acts the most stable, calm, and polite, but while working at Spudsy's, she's suddenly acting very not sober when she gets hit by the restaurant's signature stupid sauce, which one NPC claims actually makes you stupid. This led to a lot of jokes about her being not sober, with Gangle even referencing that she should be waiting until a designated break to huff paint. This just ends up making Ragatha a bit more honest than usual, with her saying more so what she is thinking as she thinks it, instead of the final thought that she normally filters for.
No offense, but you're kind of annoying when you have your happy mask. Wait, is that mean to say?
Notice how she says what she's thinking, and then afterwards wonders out loud if what she said was wrong. She clearly doesn't want to say something mean, but she said it before she could think about it, and it really repaints her entire character. Until now, I would have thought of Ragatha as naturally nice, but Gangle was already having trouble connecting with her, it would seem. Pomni even points to Ragatha as someone she assumes would be perfect for Gangle to talk to about her emotional issues. But Gangle explained that she doesn't trust that Ragatha means what she says. This can lead to feeling like someone is condescending you instead of helping you, and as we see in the beginning of the episode, Ragatha is more focused on punishing Jax than helping Gangle. Ragatha is really no different from Gangle in this episode, putting herself out there as the manager of the humans to such a degree that Pomni feels like she's unqualified just to have an emotional talk with Gangle instead of her. It makes her an interesting character because having bad or crude first thoughts doesn't make you bad yourself, and she knows to double check herself. She may have learned this growing up, which she indicates was a stressful experience in this episode, with rambling mentions of dance lessons and tea parties. At one point, she also mentions missing having horses, and it gave the impression that Ragatha came from a rich family that had high expectations of her. In this sort of situation, she would have been taught at a very young age to filter her thoughts, and to instead manipulate people with your kindness. Having crude initial thoughts doesn't make you a bad person, as I said, but it can definitely make you see someone differently when you realize that, like Ragatha, they have all these negative thoughts about you before they come to the conclusion that they want you to hear. And it once again gives the impression that sometimes hiding behind those nice words, we have a monster saying hurtful things. Part 3. Kinger. In episode 3 of the show, we saw a little bit of this deconstruction with Kinger as well, though it was a lot more metaphorical. With Gangle at Spudsy's, we got to see a literal day in the life of Gangle before she came to the amazing digital circus. But in episode 3, the implications come from the surreal horror that manifest around Kinger. In this episode, we learn that Kinger had once lived in the digital circus with his wife Queenie. We now know that Queenie has abstracted, and in this episode, we get the implication that it was actually Kinger's fault. This can be seen in the game that Kane created, where Kinger is paralleled with the story of an angel hunter who ends up shooting his own wife while trying to solve the mystery of a monster. This is implied to be similar to what happened to Kinger within the circus itself, when he tells Pomni that the most important thing you can do is make sure that someone doesn't feel unloved by you, something she seemed to take very seriously in this new episode with Gangle. The implication here is that, at the very least, Kinger is the one responsible for his wife abstracting emotionally. He implies here that he was the one who made his wife feel unloved, and in a place where they really had no one but each other. With the story of the angel hunter in the haunted mansion, we also get the implication that Kinger is obsessive to a fault. Not just so much that he might have accidentally hurt someone, but that he becomes the monster he was fearing with his paranoia and declining mental state. Part 4. Zooble. Zooble is a character we know a lot less about, but I've had it pointed out to me that Zooble's therapy session with Kane may say a lot more about their real-life experience than the interaction with levels that we see with Kinger or Gangle. In Zooble's subplot for episode 3, Kane tries to get to the bottom of why Zooble doesn't like his adventures, but he is unable to understand Zooble's more human issues. The show deals a lot with mental health, with abstraction being a sort of final breakdown, Kinger being more so generically insane, and Gangle talking about having a manic episode. Zooble is portrayed in this scene as very much in the right, not just because Kane is incapable of understanding the needs of humans who don't want to be stuck in a video game, but because Kane also doesn't want to understand these issues. The problem, however, is that Zooble literally tells Kane to forget about everything they said when Kane struggles to understand. Kane is an artificial intelligence program, and even if you figuratively say, forget about it, he takes it very literally, and he even explains to Zooble that they won't let Kane remember these things even though he's trying to help. Zooble is ultimately one of the few characters who doesn't seem to have a monster underneath, simply letting out their honest truth instead of hiding anything. And while that makes Zooble more angry on the surface, you can't really blame them with the situation that they are in, and it still makes you feel like you're having a more authentic interaction with them than someone like Ragatha, who is trying to be helpful, but who is still being rather manipulative. But I've seen it suggested by at least one commenter that this therapy session may allude to their life before the circus, one filled with therapy, and one where Zooble is still generally rejecting any help that is actually offered. Zooble is a complex character, and like I said, maybe one of the few who are generally a good person. But there may also be something of a monster hiding under these different toy parts that Zooble has pieced together to form something of a temporary identity. Part 5. Pomni. Pomni is our main character and the one who seems the most pure, but even in the beginning there were hints that she wasn't the best person that she could be. We saw this when Ragatha was hurt and asking for help, and Pomni ended up abandoning her to try and get out of the game. By getting out of the game, she could more so help the others, of course, don't get me wrong, but she took a risk because she was more afraid of her own safety than helping others. I don't really want to paint someone as being a monster simply for being human, and this kind of flight or fight response is definitely very human. But if we're exploring who characters might be a little behind their mask, this would be a place to start with Pomni. She is sweet and well-meaning, and even when it comes to the NPCs, she wants to help them when they experience pain similar to her own. And what she did for Gangle at the end of their shift was absolutely beautiful. But there is always the possibility that Pomni may have a monster inside of her as well. Part of me does want to believe that Pomni is a Jesus figure, what with her red and blue outfit Jesus is wearing in this recreation of the Last Supper, but if she does have a monster hidden inside of her, it may be that she abandoned others in real life, leading to someone perhaps deciding that she deserved to be put into the digital circus. Part 6. Jax. Jax is a character who is pretty overtly evil in the show, wanting to inflict misery on others just for easy narcissistic fuel. He makes it hard to call other characters monsters because of how much their issues could be seen as a response to his own behavior. Even if those toxic traits of the other characters have origins before Jax, he takes an already unsafe environment and keeps harassing you, and that is not the kind of situation where people can stay healthy. The scary thing about this is it's all rather simple compared to what we've seen for some of the other characters, or at least what's been hinted at them in their real lives. We could say that there isn't more to Jax and that he really is just a bully, and that this bullying is enough for him to actually deserve to be here, but it gives the impression that somewhere below the surface there's even more horrifying ideas that Jax has that he simply doesn't go through with. He's a character I should be maybe saying a lot more about in this kind of video, but the truth is that I'm absolutely horrified about what we might actually learn about him, as I don't think it's going to be justification for the way he acts, and instead something that's going to make us hate him even more, even if we understand him. And a lot of people are kind of upset when we aren't seeing him become nicer instead of more mean. But what about you guys? Let me know what you think each digital circus character is doing to themselves in this digital hellscape in the comments down below. See you guys next time.